Hi everyone, welcome to my session about mastering Xamarin.Forms Shell. One of the most important things in an app is the main navigation. We have a couple of patterns or rules that are very common through all apps, or at least the most of the apps. If you have used Snapchat, they break every navigation rule that ever have been created. But most of the apps follow the guidelines created by Apple and Google for apps. The most common navigation patterns that we see in apps is tab navigation and a navigation with a flyout menu or hamburger menu that it's often called. In Xamarin.Forms, some of these patterns have been pretty complicated to implement, and it has resulted in a lot of code just to do a simple menu. Here is an example how it could look if you had a master detail page and you have the first tab with page. You need to add the master content, detail content. You need to add navigation pages for each page, each tab, and if you want to change content in the details, you need to add some type of events or messaging center stuff. So it's have been pretty complicated. So in Xamarin.Forms 4.0, they introduced something that they call Shell. And that's what I should talk about today, how to use Shell to create the main structure of the app, the main navigation of the app. So my name is Hindrikes. I'm a developer working for 1337. I have written a book about Xamarin.Forms. It's called Xamarin.Forms Project. I wrote it together with my colleague at 1337, Johan Karlsson. And we're also doing a podcast together called The Code Behind. You find me on Twitter, and I also used to blog about Xamarin and Azure mostly. So let's talk about tabs. Tabs and bottom tabs especially have been very common on iOS apps, and this have been more common on Android apps. In pre 4.0 we have tabbed pages in Xamarin.Forms. We still have it, and it's not deprecated or obsolete or something like that, but the recommendation is to use Shell. So first I will show you how to implement tabs that look like this. You have tabs in the bottom, and this is from my sample app. You can find the code on GitHub, the Hindrikes /formula app. So the only thing to achieve this is you add a new file. Instead of creating a main page, for example, and wrap it in a navigation page and set the main page of the app to that, you create a new class, XAML or C#, and set that as the main page of the app. All my examples is using XAML because I think it's more easy to create UIs using XAML. So this is a basic example how you can just add a tab bar with two tabs. Create the shell, of course, a shell element and a tab bar element, and add content pages. So every content page will be a tab in the bottom tabs of the app. You can also wrap this in a shell content object instead of a content page, for example, like this. And you can see here I have not the actual page in the shell content. I instead using content template. And the reason of that is I don't want this page to be loaded when I start the app. If I just specify content pages or I wrap content pages in a shell content, it will load all the tabs on startup. It could be good if you have a page that you know that 99% of the user will open. But if you have a one tab that is not used very often on your user, it's better to load it asynchronously when the user needs it. So then you can do it like this and specify the content template and use data template markup extension instead and specify what page you want to load there. So this is adding tabs. If you want to add a flyout menu, you can just add pages like this to it. So if you don't specify tab bar, it will be a flyout menu. it would look like this. So for each page you specify here, it will add one new menu options, and it will open a page when you press it. In this example, I also add a flyout header. It's not default, but you can add it very easily. And you can have templates how you want each item to look as well. So you can this was created with this code, but you can also add menu items to it. So if you, for example, have items you want to add to the menu that doesn't have a page, you maybe just want to run some code when the user presses it, open a alert, or you want to open a website or something else that doesn't are a page, or you want to run some code before you navigate to a page, then you can use a menu item in a flyout menu instead. And of course you can combine them. You can use flyout and tabs together. It will look like this. You have tabs in the bottom, and you have the hamburger up here in the left corner. And that is very easy to achieve as well. In your shell, you will add a flyout item instead, so you can group what pages that will be in that flyout item, and then we will add 2 pages to it, and we will have 2 tabs. If you want to have icons on the tabs or on a flyout menu, we need to specify that as well. But for content page, we need to use the shell content element and wrap the content page in it to have many icons on it. I will show you the code for this formula up later, and you can see how I have achieved that. What you also can do with shell is that you can add top tabs, like old Android apps has by default. Earlier, when you use tab page, for example, in Xamarin.Forms, you have only top tabs. Later, you could add bottom navigation tabs as well, but in shell you can easily build both top tabs and you can build bottom tabs. And the bottom tabs you will look like this. You can see them up here. And the code is very simple here as well. You create a tab bar. This code is not for if you have a flyout menu, it's just if you have a bottom tab and top tabs. So in that tab you want to have the top tabs. You also add a tab element, you set a title for it, and then you will add the pages to it that will be visible in the top tab. So here you have shell content, and you need to set the title on the shell content here for it to be visible in the tab. That if you set title to content page, it will be the title of the page, not the title of the tab. So you need to wrap it in a shell content, and you can also use content template here if you want, as I showed you earlier, if you don't want the content to be loaded directly. One other thing they added to shell that makes it more easy to create is SearchBar, because earlier if you want to have a search bar in the title area or at the top, if you want to, like this, it could be a little bit complicated. It became easier in 3.5 release, where you can I think it was the 3.5 release, you can customize the title view, but before that you had to do everything with the custom renderers in Xamarin.Forms. So the only thing you need to do now is to create a search handler that handles the search. So it could be like in this example, where the users get suggestions on what to search for, or you can just specify a command what should happen when the user press search. But you need to create a search handler anyway. But that will be, if you don't want to have the suggestions, will just be like an empty class, but it's that using search handler as a base class. But in most cases, you want to do something and help the user searching. So you will override the onQueryChange method, and there you will perform the search based on the new value that the user have it. I will show you how this code look like in a real example later. And you also have overrides on item selected. So when user press one of the search suggestions, you can decide what should happen. There are also a couple of other overrides that is useful, but these are the most common overrides that you will do if you want to use a search bar in a Xamarin.Forms app. When you will add that search bar to your page in XAML, you do like this. You will do it on the pages, not in the shell file, so only on the pages where you want to have the search bar. But you need to use it as an attached property, so you will use shell.search handler, and then you will specify your custom search handler. So you can see in this example I have set the command property that will perform a full search, for example, that will navigate to another page for the search result. Show results is equal to true, sets that it will show this preview or search suggestion view. And display member name is just what value to show from the binding context. If you want, you can also specify a data template, so you can customize the search suggestion to look whatever you want. One other thing that is new with Xamarin.Forms Shell is navigation. Before, you have used the navigation page that you have in bottom of everything, and you pushed and popped views pages to it. You can still do that, and in most cases you will not use the new shell navigations. So if you take a look at shell navigation, you will maybe think that things are missing, like push model and things like that. But for that you can use the old navigation. The new navigation is URI-based, and you will specify routes for it. So if, for example, in this flyout menu, I have a route that is news, and I have also a route for every tab. So to navigate to this, the second tab here that has the title tab 2, I will use this code, shell.current go to async. Then I will specify a URL to this. And you can also send parameters in the URL. I will show you soon how to do that. But the most of the rules you will probably specify in the XAML, but you can also register your custom routes like this in the code. So if you want to use navigation parameters, you will do that like this in the URL. So specify ID, for example, will be like this. ID is equal to 1, and in your page that you navigate to, you will create attribute that is query parameter, and it should not be name here, it should be ID. Instead, that will map it, the query parameter, to the ID property. So that was everything I had with PowerPoint today. So let's dive into Visual Studio and show how this will work for real. Here I just have a blank solution based on the blank Xamarin.Forms template. So you can see I have a main page, and I have the app class specify main page as the main page. So we will delete this. Is the font size okay for you? Yes, of course. Okay, let's go. So we deleted the main page, the default page, and we will create a new XAML page. we will use the content page SAML, but we will change the base class from content page to shell instead. So I used to call my shell for main page. In most of the examples for Microsoft, they call it app shell, but it doesn't matter what you call it. But you will probably just have one shell for each app. So I delete content page as the base class in the code behind file, close it, and I will change base class in the SAML. Well, this is a partial class. I only need to specify the base class once. So now we can, for example, create a tab bar, and we can add pages to it. And if we want, and what we probably would do in the most examples is we will not create the page here in the shell. So instead we'll go and create separate pages for each one. We can call it main page or main view, because we will have in many cases have a MVVM pattern. We can add a label to it so we know what view it is. View 1. And to add it to the shell, we of course need to import the namespace. Call it root because it's in the root. And then we can add the page like this. So now we will have a tab bar with one tab. But because we only have one item here, the tab in the bottom will not be visible. We need to add 2 tabs to achieve that. So let's add a shell content here instead. And here we can specify icon. What's great with Xamarin.Forms 4 and icons is that we can use font icons as well. So we don't have to use PNG images that it was before. But we have not imported any icons to this project, so I will show you that in my other projects later. Tab 2. Tab 1. And here we'll use content template, data template, and we will add it in the same way. Okay, let's try to run this. Of course, we need to set the main page to the main shell instead. Let's try it again. So now when I have Xamarin.Forms SAML hot reload activated, I can do changes to my SAML code without having to close the debugger, don't have to rebuild it again. I can just make my changes, save the file, and I will see the result in the emulator or simulator directly. So if I, for example, will add some padding here, I can do that pretty easy. So we will wrap it in a grid first. Oh, now we have padding. So that's make the developer life much faster, easier than before. If we now want to customize the look and feel of the shell, it's pretty easy. we can just, for example, set background color to red, and we will have red color both at the tabs and on the title view. But we can also set, for example, if for flyout background color, and if we want to set the color of the tabs, we need to use a task property for shell, and then we can set tab bar background color to blue, like this. So if we only set background color of the shell, it will affect both the title view and the tabs, but we can specify it pretty easy for the tabs as well. So we have shell dot tab bar foreground color white, and we can specify the selected color, and this will also affect if we have icons, because icons will be the color is set here. It doesn't matter what color your icon have, it will be overridden by the color you specify. And this was pretty complicated to do if you used the tab page before. You had to create a custom renderer for each platform to achieve this. So we can have disabled color, we can have foreground color, we can have title color, for example. So it's pretty easy to customize how the shell will look. It's hard to see that it's yellow down here with that color, so you can take red instead. I don't know if you can see it. I can see it here. So let's create, remove the tab bar here, for example. Now we maybe need to recompile it to have a flyout menu, but we can try it, see if hot reload can handle it. Good. So now we instead have a flyout menu like this. And you can change pages like this. So if we now want to, for example, to disable the flyout in some cases, we can do that by setting flyout behavior to disabled, or to locked if you want it to be visible all the time. Could be useful on an iPad app, for example. But now we want to have our flyout like standard, and we can specify flyout header like this. This is the header. It's text and label, and we'll okay. I know. Let's try to recompile it and run again. And now we have a header like this. So it's pretty easy to customize the flyout as well, and you can use templates for each item, so you can set them to look whatever you want. So one case that maybe not is obvious when you're reading the documentation, if you have, for example, a sign-in view before your main content, how to do that with shell. My first idea of that was to create another page before the shell and then replace the main page of the app. You could do that, but it will probably be slower and in the navigation than just use the same shell. So if we go back here to the main shell, we specify the tab bar again. Remove that one. We can specify another shell content here. Page. Or let's create a login page instead. Login view and have that as the first view. You can add just a simple button to it right now. Just to place it in the middle of the screen, and we will add a clicked events to it. So now if we go back to the shell, we can set routes on this content. For example, the login content can be route login. Don't use capital letters here, just use like this. Login, root, login view. And then we set a route here as well to, for example, main. Then we can go to the button handler and just use the route as an URL shell, current, go to async. Like this. And it should hopefully work. Let's try it. Add some characters to the SAML somewhere. That is not correct. Login view. Okay, strange. Try to format the document. Sometimes we get expected. Line 6, shell content. Okay, strange. It looks like you cannot have an empty line as the first line in a file. To get rid of this, we can go to the shell just to and disable the flyout behavior. Like this, and now we can press the login button and we will be here at the tabs. So that is the best way to handle login with the shell. If you have a flyout menu, it's a little bit more complicated. I can show you that in my Formula app. Open a new instance of Visual Studio. And the reason there is you need to hide the first login page from the flyout because it will be added to the menu, the login page, if you don't hide it. Hopefully there will be improvements of this, because I know that there are an issue in GitHub for this. I also think there is a pull request to add is visible to shell items, so you easily can just bind to it to say if it's visible or not. But in the current stable release and also in the pre-releases, it's not possible. So what I had to do there is I had to remove it from the shell. And you can see here in creating an override of on navigating. So when I navigate from my login route, I will remove that item from the shell. So items.remove, because shell have a property that is items that contains all the items that you can find in the shell. So this shell file looks like this. You have the flyout header. You have some properties that sets the background color, for example, and here I specify background color for title view, tab bar title color. With the attached properties, you can do both like this and how I showed you earlier. It doesn't matter where you place them. It will work anyway. So here I have the shell content with the login page and the tab bar and the flyout code. So we can take a look at the search handler. So let's dive into that one. In this case, my article search handler. So the first thing, as I said, you need to do is to create this search handle and add search handler as the base class. So in this case, on query changed. Here I will check if new value has a value. If that's the case, I will get all items and I will filter on title and description to see if they contain my search value. Here you also need to reset the search suggestion if it doesn't matter match anymore. But to set the search suggestion, just set the item source property to this enumeration of items, and it will be rendered. For example, in this case, I can have my feed item, and that has a property that is called title. I just specify display member name is title, or create a template for each item. But the first thing I did when I created this demo was to go with the data template, but for some reason it's crashed. So right now there have at least problem on this on iOS. On Android it worked. So when I press an item, I often want something to happen, and then, as I said before, we can use override on item selected. In this case, it will just open an browser with the article. I should probably cast this item to like this instead. Feed item, and then I can do this for real. Link. Okay, we can try to run this up. You can see how it looks for real. So here we have a login view. You can just press login and you will come here to the first tab. Here I also have created using the new carousel view in Xamarin.Forms. This is pretty nice. Still in preview, but you can activate it also in the stable release just setting a flag in your main activity or in your app delegate. I can show you how to do that as well, because I think it's really nice with the carousel view. You set the flag like this, carousel view experimental. Oops. You can see that they also have a bug here for search bar. You need to switch tab or something to make it the color I have set for it. I set that the background color should be white. It was red when I started that, so that's also a bug in Xamarin.Forms right now. And here you can see the top tabs. And all the content in here using the collection view, because from the beginning I wrote this app to show both shell and how collection view works. So this is pretty nice. You can create a grid view like this pretty easy with the collection view. Let's go back here. Can take back the flyout item. Comment it out. So here you can see how to set icons and how you can use it for basically every image in Xamarin.Forms. Some of the old items, like for example toolbar, you cannot use the icon property. You need to use the icon source property, or icon image source, maybe is the name, instead. Probably of backward compatibility, because those icon properties use the file image source as a type. Now they're using just image source, so you can have whatever implementation of image source that you want. But to use, for example, font icons, you need to use the font icon source, specify a glyph, and of course a font family. In this case it's a Font Awesome, the free package I have used. In this case it differs a little bit between iOS and Android. So you can either do it on platform here, or you can specify it as a static resource in your app XAML or at page level if you want that as well. And you also need to set the size, for example 22 in this case, and the color of it, and this to make it black, for example. And it's the same for shell content, tab icon. Yeah, you can use it everywhere, and it's a pretty simple way to use icons, especially if you have a font icon. This also makes it possible to use SVG icons pretty easy. You need to add some code to do it. I've written a blog post how you can use font icons together with Skia Sharp to render them, for example. I plan to make it a package also, so it could be easier, but if your organization already have and using font icons on web, because it's pretty common to use font icons for web, you can use them now in Xamarin.Forms and the Xamarin.Forms Shell and tabs pretty easy. The only thing you need to do on iOS to do that is to specify it in the info plist file like this. Source. Fonts provided by application, and specify that Font Awesome OTF file is used for that one. So if you try this out on iOS and it doesn't work, you need to add it to the info plist file as well. For Android, you only need to add it to the asset catalog and you can use it. And here you can also see how I use menu item in the flyout just to navigate to the motorsport.com website that is the source for the data in this app. And then I use the command property and bind it to a command in my view model and do the navigation here. Do you have any question about Shell or something else you want me to show that you don't have seen so far? If you can use Shell and push notification, and it works better. Yes, I would say, because if you can use Shell and easily more specify what you want to navigate to, I think it's much easier with Shell. You can just create a route to what you want to navigate to. So that's much easier with Shell. Good question. I have not have any problem, at least with Shell, with that. So, but I don't really know. I don't have any problem, but I can imagine that it could be. Like you said, you have to wait for Xamarin.Forms to be loaded. Anything else? Okay, if you have any questions, you can come to talk to me here today. I'll be here for a couple of hours more, or you can contact me on Twitter, LinkedIn, for example. Thank you for coming, listening.